Hello, this is Found Electric Ghost. Is this Desideria?
Yes, hello. Hi.
Hi, thank you for joining, and glad we got the time zone issue. So, yeah, I just want to give a little brief intro. Found Electric Ghost, we're an indie music producer and podcaster. We've been podcasting since 2018. We've interviewed over 30 artists from around the world.
Right.
We're a member. And we're on 11 different platforms, and we've hit over 20,000 listeners since 2018. So, yeah, I was looking at your YouTube channel, and let me know if you have any other places where your music is, because we can provide links on the podcast to everywhere your music is.
Okay.
But, yeah, so I just want to give another little brief intro. Like, from your YouTube channel, it says you're from Gotland, Sweden. You're an experimental pop composer. You do weird pop, sound art, ambient. You're a singer-songwriter. And yeah, you kind of channel. I'm kind of old school. I'm over 50 years old. I kind of hear a little Kate Bush. I hear some Tori Amos. I hear some like very interesting electronic music. You know, like I'm a big fan of new romantic stuff, so I hear I hear a little Susie and the Banshees, but that's me. But like I'm a big proponent of the old school, like sounds with analog synths and kind of hardware work. I use Moogs and Prophets and old Rolands and things like that. But your sound is like really interesting, because a lot of times today, with everybody using plugins and stuff, your sounds sound very unique. They don't sound like they were pulled from a DAW, even if they are. So you've got really good like choices in what you're using for your palette, so I just wanted to say that up front.
Oh, thank you.
And I really like the video that's tied to your Instagram is for Serotonin.
Yeah.
And, being from the U.S., I can understand the lyrics on, but the feel, like I said, it's like Kate Bush, like it's like a dream pop progressive sound. It's really interesting. But when we get into what we talk about, we usually start with the first question is like, when did you first get into music and at what age? And then we'll kind of build to how you got to a song like Serotonin.
Okay. So yeah, I'm it's an interesting question really for me, because when I was a very young, like a child, I was very interested in sound, even though I maybe didn't define it like that at the time. But I was raised really like in nature a lot and kind of offside a bit. And my parents and my family wasn't like very artistic or like anything like that. So I didn't know much about like artists or music. My first CDs were like from these $1 shops or like 10 crown shops in Sweden. That was like 90s music that like never made it,
What kind of bands were you listening to? Those are probably bands I might have listened to.
Probably. I didn't even register, at the time. It was like this super electric, often like in the 90s, it was popular to make like a top, la la la, and then mix all these different artists on an album.
Oh, okay. So you're just getting like these like K-Tel in the US. K-Tel, and they would have like every disco song or every new wave song from Blondie, and like all these bands would all be on this one like vinyl.
Exactly. Only that like it was probably those kind of artists that nobody even like knew about anyways, because it was
it probably wasn't KC and the Sunshine Band, or it's probably some band you never heard of. Like the big star of the Velvet Underground that nobody knew.
No, exactly. There's like the super electric, I was but I was really like I was spending a lot of time by myself singing and in nature, and I like that. I like to be like by myself a lot as a child, and I was a lot singing and being out and listening to different things, and I was like trying to make things like see how things sounded, and yeah, it was like a game for me. It still is in a way.
Yeah,
uh
yeah.
yeah.
So
And
how?
mm,
Yeah, so maybe like so you
yeah.
said you weren't trained like in a conservatory, you,
No.
right? You just are you like self-taught, or did you actually start getting into music theory and other things later?
You know, when I have some different trainings. Like now, I've been even to like composition school,
Okay.
um, but it started late for me. Like, you know, when I was in like high school, I still didn't know who like Michael Jackson was,
Oh,
and I went to a music school. I started a music school in like sixth grade here. So
mhm.
it's like between you're like an older child to an early teenager.
Yeah,
Um, and at that, I was met by really people who were like, "Oh, the Beatles, and David Bowie is the most amazing thing." And it is too, but it's only if you have a certain reference point that you understand how great it is at what it is.
yeah,
Um, so for me, having no reference point like that, I was just really felt like people were really pretentious uh, and strange. So I ended up hating like the music.
hating what everybody loved. You
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the music. I'm not a
yeah,
big fan of Beatles, but I am a fan of David Bowie. So it's
yeah,
both,
yeah.
Uh,
Bowie's a big draw that hear a lot of
yeah,
musicians today, just
mm,
because he reinvented himself all the time.
yeah,
He went
yeah,
into different genres. He went to Berlin.
mm,
He did all this stuff with Brian Eno.
yeah,
He was like on the cutting edge where like Kraftwerk were building. He was like in on that sound
yeah,
that
mm,
became new wave. He was like doing new
mm,
wave or new
yeah. He was
romantic before everybody else.
exactly, yeah, 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 exactly. No, no, now I'm really into it. Like I've caught up since.
Yeah, I think a lot. I mean, I'm a synthesizer player, so Bowie was always very appealing because he had his rock phase,
Yeah,
during the Ziggy Stardust and all that.
yeah,
But then
yeah.
when he went into this heavy electronic stuff, that
Mm-hmm.
actually, like I said, is a precursor to the '80s. It's a
Mm-hmm.
precursor to like Kraftwerk and the Cure and all these bands like New Order and
Yeah,
Joy Division. All those bands kind of
yeah,
took from what he was doing when he was experimenting in Berlin, and
yeah.
that has always really appealed to me when an artist is willing to do that.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I think you're right completely. And also his sketches. I saw when I was in New York like last year, I saw the museum there, and I got to see some of his like sketches
The
and all.
paintings, the drawings.
Yeah, and exactly the visual vision as well, and like the how much conceptual things went into his work. I find that really inspiring. I find him as a person really inspiring and interesting. And
Yeah, because a
yeah,
lot of what I like to do is like what I heard from him, and I also heard from like Prince was
mm,
like the reason like if you're an artist, sometimes your stagecraft is very important. And
yeah,
if you think of like a heavy metal band, not to come down on metal bands, but they'll just go out in their
mm,
jeans and stuff,
mm,
and that's fine. But that's what they like to do. But guys like Prince and Bowie felt like there's a part of like entertainment or music that it's about like the stagecraft. It's
yeah, yeah,
about becoming a character and kind of being
mm,
like an actor. And the
yeah,
cool thing about Bowie is he mixed like theatrical and
mm,
film and art,
yeah,
like the way Warhol did with the Velvets. Andy
yeah,
Warhol with the Velvet Underground, he mixed like very
exactly.
advanced art with like
Yeah,
a punk aesthetic, where Bowie
yeah,
took like the theatrics of like rock and
yeah,
then like opera and off Broadway and movies and film, and he mixed it all together. And then he did it like a method actor. He
mm,
became Ziggy, or he became the Thin White Duke, or he became Aladdin Sane. He became those characters. And he was like playing them like the way Al Pacino or De Niro get into a
mm,
role. He would like become like a method actor. I think that is
yeah,
very interesting.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I can see that. I'm really into like the concept of method acting. You know, I used to study Stanislavski for
Cool.
years.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So that's awesome. So,
yeah. Oh, but yeah, it's interesting you say like that, like Velvet Underground and yeah, and that whole
yeah,
pop movement and that time. It's just a lot about it is really interesting. Like I'm really interested in John Cage as well, and like his way of thinking
mhm.
about like constructing music in certain systems, and like I don't know, I really love his work. Like what's it called? Like it's Silence. It was when I always forget his name, but his one of his best friends who was also like a big composer at
Hmm.
that time, I think, or if he was a maybe a visual
Hmm.
artist. Do you know who it is? Like Lecture on Silence is the
Oh,
one I
okay. Yeah, I
mean.
think I
Like,
know. It kind of escapes me, but I know what you're
yeah,
talking about. The area you're talking about.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like a lot of
He's like,
artists.
I got nothing
It's
to
very
say.
interesting. Like
Yeah,
silence. Like if you think about, like if you're talking about Prince is a
yeah,
big pop star, but as a pop star, like When Doves Cry is very interesting just
yeah,
because of the silence. And the fact that it doesn't have a
yeah,
bass line, that has all this sparse nature, some of his early work like Dirty Mind, it's got this kind of demo, very experimental
mm,
quality that a major pop star usually doesn't take risks like that.
yeah,
Doesn't
exactly.
mix genres at the level he did. Do very
Yeah,
like radical compositions and actually get them to be number one. That is very
mm,
hard to do, and I've always been interested in like the mega stars that can do that, and then also like the
yeah,
stars like an Alex Chilton from Big Star. I mean, he's a favorite. Big Star is kind of like the modern '70s Velvet Underground. They were like a pop band from the U.S. created by Alex Chilton,
mm,
who was famous for being in a band called the Box Tops when he was a teenager. He did these kind of pop
mm,
songs, this famous song called The Letter. And then he created an American copy of the Beatles called Big Star. Now,
mm.
Big Star was never that big. Not a lot of people know him, bro. They had 3 records.
No, I
Yeah, they're
didn't.
like five
Mm,
star records, but like bands like REM,
mm,
The Replacements, who could do a lot of like grunge and indie bands from the late '80s, early '90s were name checking
yeah.
Big Star all the time, like the Velvets.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
I always was very interested in bands that never made it, but then are critically
Yeah,
acclaimed.
right. I love that as well.
um, yeah, maybe it's kind of
Mm.
mirroring what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally get that.
So,
Yeah.
as a musician, you learn composition. You went to school. So, what are your
Right.
primary instruments? Are you
Mm,
like a keyboard player or a guitar
mm.
player or a vocalist primarily?
Uh, mm, I mean, I think I would say I'm a producer primarily,
Okay.
and I use a lot my voice, and I play the harp as well. But I'm self-taught harpist, so I'm not classical. Uh, I usually play it like kind of almost the wrong way.
Yeah, well, that's always good. I always think it's good to play the wrong way because
Yeah,
then you actually create something new.
yeah. Yeah, especially with like orchestral instruments, I find it really interesting because it's like there's this culture around it that you still can't do that. Like with guitar, you can do whatever. Uh, but when I was in that music school, I was quite young, you know, so I learned that was all about like pop rock and kind of understanding um, the music history in terms
Hmm.
of that. And I learned drums, guitar, bass, and piano to play basic. But I would say I'm pretty crap at all of them.
No, but I mean, I think the whole point of being a producer or singer songwriter
Yeah.
is you don't have to
Mm.
be like pitch perfect in your voice. You don't have to be the best guitar player. But
No,
like you look at
exactly.
Dylan. I mean, Dylan's like the primary example.
Yeah.
He doesn't have perfect pitch. He's not the greatest guitar player in the
No.
world, but he's created some of the
Mm.
greatest music in the world. He's not at the
Yeah.
level of like, a Hendrix. He's not at the level of a Eric Clapton. But as a songwriter,
Mm.
you don't necessarily have to be a Clapton. You don't have to be like a
No.
Townsend or somebody at that level. If you have something to say and you do it in a unique way, you see what happens with like a Dylan. You know,
Mm. Yeah.
that's I've always told people like don't quit because you're not.
Mm.
how to use
Yeah.
it, and your own style can be its own thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think so too. And I like to think of it more as like, because yeah, just to finish up, like, because I keep getting off track, but I went 2 years to like more like notation based composition school recently as well, and learned about like orchestral music, and then on Gotland as well, where I have part of my heritage from, and I also I went for a year of like free art where I like made this project in like 5.1 surround sound that was like made of recordings from my childhood favorite places, and then I tried to make a concept where it would be like my like roots or my childhood dreams, how they could kind of come into womanhood. uh I was like, yeah, spending a year with that. It was becoming like a 40 minutes kind of sound installation thing for cinematic sound. So that was, and I'm into many different things, and Serotonin is definitely like a pop song, or like some kind of pop song
Yeah,
at least.
it's like a dream pop. It
At
seems like
least in terms
dream
of how,
pop, synth wave,
yeah,
ambient,
yeah,
progressive electronic
exactly.
music. Which,
Yeah, yeah. I like that description a lot. I feel like that's very much where I wanted to go with it. And I made it for a movie, um, a fashion movie made by Tony Kim called Alter Ego.
is there a
Um,
soundtrack that's on a
and
soundtrack?
Yeah, it's a soundtrack. Yeah, but the rest of my music, I do a lot of like experimental, more like ambient things, and I like to start from. I like to not think of it as music so much. Like I do construct more music or think more music when I write more like a song like that. But often, I think of it more as like sound by sound, and yeah, it's more
Yeah,
interesting for me to think of it as sounds than music, and then it does become music because I have this need to like express
I
myself.
think one cool term, like there was
But
a term that
yeah.
Jimi Hendrix was asked, like, what is
Mm,
Electric Ladyland? And he said, well, it's a sound painting. And I always took that.
right.
If you think about it, and you think about Andy Warhol, you think about Bowie, you think about a lot of like modern, progressive bands like Yes and Pink Floyd. The idea of taking progressive electronic music and making it into sound paintings, Hendrix kind of described that
Mm,
about Electric Lady in '68, 69, and that because if you listen to Electric Lady, you hear birds, you hear water, you hear all these strange things that he did with the
mm,
guitar that normally you would do with a synth. And I think the idea that you can take sound and create a painting uh, is a
yeah,
really good way
exactly.
to express it. And I've talked to a lot of dream pop, electronica,
Mm,
synthwave artists that actually, didn't
mm.
find those words, but that's what they're doing, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I completely get the what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's always been like people were like, well, who you're inspired by, and then I'll say Hendrix, and said, what's that got to do with synths? And I said, well, anybody who's doing anything interesting, that doesn't matter that you just don't say Rick Wakeman or you say Bertie Worrell. Not that you wouldn't, but you can also
Mm,
be inspired by other musicians that are on a different instrument that they can inspire you. I listen to Coltrane, and I listen to like Sun Ra,
yeah,
and yeah, a lot of jazz
yeah,
inspires me, but just because the structures are so advanced in what they're doing, and what they're expressing is like a sound painting. If you listen to jazz, it's a sound
yeah.
painting, and it drives all kinds of moods and feelings, and you can kind of see the
Mm,
pictures. You get synesthesia in a way when you listen to music like that. And I think that's always
mm,
inspiring. It seems like you're in that same kind of space based on I've seen your YouTube channel, and
mm,
the video for Serotonin. Well, it has just a
mm.
picture, but yeah, your overall channel has some interesting things on it. We'll put the link on the podcast when we put it up.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, so maybe go through some of the other questions. So So you've been
Yeah,
working on music since you were like 6, 7 years old, like you were saying, right? And
probably, yeah.
when did you realize that not everybody who goes to music class decides that they're actually going to be a musician?
Mm,
When did you decide that
right.
you didn't want to just be like a classical musician and play in an orchestra or play in a cover band, that you want to actually write your own material?
Oh, it was very clear from the beginning. Like I hated to play covers, and I hated to go to music school, um, and to learn about music in a way that I felt was square. Um, so I thought that I became uninterested in music after that. I was like, this is not for me, because what always drove me forward was this like innate, really like a need to express myself in some way. Um, so after that, I thought like, because I wanted to sing as well, and I went to like a singing class,
Oh,
for like
so you were
more
trained
classical singing
trained by a
teacher.
classical? You were saying?
I wasn't. I just went to the one class, and they told me your voice is completely wrong. Like you have to start completely from
Yeah, well,
the beginning.
people told Michael Stipe, and they told Dylan that they couldn't sing. Or look where they are.
Yeah, of
Yeah, so
course.
you can't go.
Yeah,
Music teachers, like, they kicked Tori Amos out of the conservatory. Uh, so
yeah,
that tells you how much
exactly.
they know.
Yeah, I mean, they know what they do, but I realized much later that when I listen to classical singers, it's not necessarily how I would like to sing, so it doesn't
Yeah,
matter
you find
at all.
you
But
find your own voice. You find what you want to do. I mean, it's cool to have the technical training to understand composition, or to
yeah,
understand what it's the boundaries that they have. It's good to understand it and then
yeah,
break them. you know, but
yeah, no, exactly. Exactly. But I think, anyways, to answer your question, like I gave up on music for a couple of years, and I thought that I would become some kind of like maybe actor, or or do something else in art. And and then when I was 18, I started writing, and then I like bought a guitar, and uh, I started like to write things. And I always had that interest for sound, and I just I would like download like a free version of Audacity and just play around, and then it would like kind of come to me again as a hobby, and it wasn't really something I thought I would be doing. um, but then it kind of grew past my interest of wanting to be an actor or something else. It just grew in me that I wanted to uh, do sound, and then it's just continued to grow. So I think that's how I ended up here, that I really want to do it in some own way or some bigger way. It's just progressed that way. Um,
so
yeah.
in terms of influences, you talked about how you name check Bowie. But if you were going to talk about some like female reference points in terms of your style, do you have other musicians, not even just female, but any other musician that big draw in
Mm,
terms of your reference points, or who you not that you're trying to emulate, but maybe you are inspired by?
mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really most like inspired by things like Aphex Twin and Arca and
Cool.
Autaker,
That's
things
interesting.
like that.
That's an interesting
Yeah,
collection. That's cool.
yeah.
No, it's just interesting to hear
I
what
really
people
like.
where they're coming from, and especially like singer songwriters always come up with a lot of things that aren't like current necessarily, but
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting, because I think that's cool to show the depth of what you're doing. Uh, so that's
Mm,
always interesting. But if you're going to describe your genre, which is always hard, people sometimes some artists like totally know what genre they're in. So I'm dream pop, I'm industrial, I'm EDM, I'm trance.
mm,
What would you say is your style? If somebody was going to pin you down, are you going to put it on a single? What
mm.
would you say it is?
Right. Mm. I think I would probably say that I'm some kind of mixture between a dream pop or some kind of like more dreamy because I use a lot of vocals in a lot of things and lyrics. So and then experimental music. So I think I'm the mix between that, and I think what I will be doing in future as well is just mix things that are a bit more towards like synthwave and pop, dream pop, or like just very ambient type of pop, and then mix it with things that are even more like electronica and so it's different things. And I do certain projects and installations that have nothing to do with me singing as well.
Visual art.
But I would say
you're a visual artist. You do a lot of visual.
No, I have many visual ideas, but I'm not like I don't make visual art so much myself, except like drawing, and I guess a little bit you could say, but like I wouldn't dare to call myself a visual artist completely. But I do work with like video ideas and concepts, and I think I'm gonna work on that more like in the future, because in that sense, like and female references, I guess I do really like Kate Bush as well, and Björk and PJ Harvey, and
I
these.
did hear that. I forgot to say that. I did hear kind of punk aesthetic a little bit from her, and some of your songs, it kind of shifts into this kind of very like powerful kind of punk aesthetic that mixed with the dream pop, which is really interesting. Yeah, so a lot of things I always ask people, because a lot of people today they live in the digital audio workstation world. They live, using Pro Tools and all those different tools. But I'm a pure electronic musician, going back to like the Jupiter 8, going back to like the Mini Moogs and EMS VC3s, and, Moog modulars, and just the whole idea of the original electronic music was it was analog, and they were and the keyboard players were considered to be electronic musicians. Now we have a lot of DJs and producers and sampling and people using a lot of different soft synths, but not actually being keyboardists or piano players or even typical musicians. They're very good producers, but they've kind of lost sight of some of the original like impetus behind the music. And so the question I have is like, are you primarily using digital audio workstations and samples and loops and soft synths, or are you using hardware synths and physical instruments like your harp?
I use both. I think that what you're saying is really relevant, and I feel like a lot of people are realizing that and going back to where it's like more like physical hardware things, and including like myself, I'm really interested in like just gearing. I would even like to really get into like Eurorack, and it's really popular these days too.
I have Eurorack I just built 2 years ago, and I'm always fiddling with it.
Oh my god!
And it's like controlled voltage analog programming. I could just go off into a total tangent, but there's something about when you have an analog synth like that, and you can just recreate it every day. Like sometimes I just pull all the wires out and start all over again. And when you do that with these machines, you don't have to get a sample. You don't have to get a plugin. You don't have to buy every day on my Moog. I can make it sound different. If I play it when it just warms up, it sounds different. If I play it after like 30 minutes, it sounds different. If I turn it on the next day, it sounds different. It just is always different. Now, some people would say, well, that's unstable and I can't use it. But if you're an experimental artist, you kind of love it, because every time you come to it, it kind of gives you something else. And you come up with different ideas on how to take the waveforms and run them through the LFOs and all these different things you can do. They're technical, but they're very artistic once you learn what they do. Yeah, once you learn what the Euroracks can do, you just, oh my gosh. Down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I know. And it's like you build a relationship with that particular entity of electronic as well. And I really feel like machines they are like entities with spirit to me. Like they have a way of carrying electronics that's, yes, it's like it's man-made, and it's like, but the electricity in itself, like through these different machines, has an expression of their sound, just like a voice in a human would. And to have something that's more of like something that you can actually connect with, I find it becomes really
Yeah, I
personal.
think the
I
like
find them
we
almost.
say, like a lot of us like that play Eurorack, we say we play the filter. That kind of means like I'll run
Yeah.
my tape, like a digital tape. I
Mm.
run through Zooms. I actually use digital recorders instead of using DAWs, because I take all my Euroracks and
Yeah.
analog gear and I kind of just start a session, and then I play
Mm.
knob per function on these synths, and I record all my knob
Mm.
changes. I record all my CV changes. I record all my slider changes. Everything I'm doing physically on the machines as a musician. So
Yeah.
when these Euroracks, they have all these dials, they look intimidating, they have all these sliders, but you can use them like the keys on a keyboard. And if you use all
Mm.
those inputs, you have so many different ways of changing the waveform that it becomes musical. If you're a
Yeah.
musician, you can use it in a musical way. And that's like the key.
Yeah.
So original electronic music that was done back in the
Exactly.
60s, like switched on Bach,
Mm.
was created
Mm.
in that kind of way, which was like the core, like
Yeah.
beginning of using modes. And so, yeah, and Keith Emerson was famous for doing that. And it's just Bernie Worrell from Funkadelic. That's how they played these instruments. And I think people are starting to realize that you have so much depth in the analog world, that you kind of have to look at it again, to see that's like the core of electronic music.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And you get a whole different perspective as well on like what electronics is, by working with it, especially like Eurorack, where you actually can build certain parts, or like at least order them and then build it together again, and you really see like how the electricity goes like through the veins of the machine. And like for me, at least, like watching videos like that, I haven't actually got it myself, but like I worked a little bit with one, and I would like to build I feel like you can really see, um yeah, you can get into like feel electronic music in like a completely different way than if you're just using software. So it's really interesting. But I like, I like in today that there is like software as well, because I feel like you get a whole other level of precision. And like there are certain things about like all of the variations that you can get with like having that, and then using software as well,
Yeah,
that's
you can
really.
combine it. Like I hear purists say we're like all analog all the way, and I combine it. I mean, I have digital, I have
Yeah.
samplers, I have, like FM digital synths
Mm.
and modern digital synths, and I got teenage engineering OPZ. But you can do all kinds of
Mm.
modern stuff and to take the classic stuff. But
Mm.
the whole point of it is that it's like a painter. Like you got a different palette for different things. Some days I want a Moog
Yeah.
bass line because the Moog, that's what it is. And other days I might use a soft synth pad, but you never know, or a sample, because I want to use a sample. But you don't say, well, one is better than the other one, or you don't ever want to touch this one. You kind of take all the tools you have and you use them based on whatever
Right.
you're trying to do,
Exactly. Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more.
So the cool thing I think today though is now we got this merging of people realizing that everything's like valid. You can go back and do like a real tape loop on a physical tape machine, or you go and get a Steinway piano, you sample it into a sampler, and then you rip it up and run it backwards and forwards and inside out. So people are doing all kinds of different things, like George Martin used to do, not to bring up the Beatles, but the backward tape looping and using the studio as a production. And if you have a DAW, you kind of be at the George Martin. You're on the grid, and you can kind of rip everything apart and do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's going
yeah.
to that, isn't it? Yeah. Mm. Mm. Totally. Mm.
So have you played,
Yeah.
like, are you primarily like a production musician that like does your visual work, you do your music, it gets out on the cloud, on the internet, But do you physically perform anywhere, or you've moved toward doing that, or have you ever done that, or are you thinking about doing it?
I'm moving towards doing that. Because at the moment I've been experimenting a lot, and just made a lot of like different hardware videos, and some more like production with some visual ideas. And I'm hoping to like release something more concrete, like maybe an EP with mixed like ambient and some more like ambient dreamy pop, and then put that together. And then when I release that, I think I'm gonna move towards also performing more and getting out there more.
So if you perform,
Yeah.
would you be somebody that would be using, just because what a lot of guys do today is like a MIDI controller off of like, main stage or something off of Apple computer, or would you actually try to find some kind of, control device, like, a Euro rack and maybe something, I don't know. How would you like anticipate doing it? Just to give an example, I'm a one-person band. And I have like a massive rig of like synths, like looking like Rick Wakeman or something. And I have all this, yeah. And I come out with a stagecraft where I dress up in an LED costume with a phantom mask, and you can't see the ghost. Phantom Electric Ghost is, the idea is it's a band of ghosts. And the lead singer of the band is me, but I'm playing a female lead singer. Josephine Electric is me, but I play her through like a vocoder. And I use like I use a Roland ZT4.
I was wondering because I listened to your podcast, and then I thought that the way that the voice in the music I heard from you sounded like the way you were speaking.
It is me.
But then it sounded like it. So I was like, is that a vocoder or is that someone else?
I learned a long time ago I didn't like my male voice. So I spent time trying to create a character, and Josephine is a result. I had all this poetry where I kind of try to channel like some characters. I created like some short stories with these female ghost characters back in the 80s. I wrote like some science fiction stories about a woman who got this, was reincarnated, came back as a ghost. And then the idea, like, she creates a band of ghosts. And they're kind of go in and out of the world. They're ethereal, they're non-ethereal. And so Phantom Electric Ghost is this thing where the ghost can actually be physical, and they can go back and forth. And Josephine is the lead singer, and she's got this whole character. And then she has her sister Stephanie, and they joined this band. They created this band, and that's what the ghost is. And it was weird because like I for years was just a musician, putting out sound paintings. Nobody really listened to me. I had like 1,500 fans. And I started doing Josephine. I never sang before back in 2016, and I went from 1,500 listens to like 90,000 listens on SoundCloud. And then I got picked up by Spotify to do this podcast. I got picked up by a record label. I'm on a record label, Bentley Records, and all because I decided to create this character that wasn't me, but it's kind of me.
Wow.
And I'm able to go places with her that I can't as like a male singer, because I kind of go into this character and I deal with her and all types of issues like domestic violence, and, trying to be like a very assertive person in a world that's not really looking for women that that kind of strength and power. And so it is taking all these different issues and kind of running it through Josephine being this not me, but me. And it was just interesting, like what you can do. And I was inspired by Bowie, like Ziggy Stardust and Prince's Camille, and even Funkadelic had some like weird vocal experiments they did back in the 70s. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. But yeah.
Wow, I fucking love that. I mean, that's really inspiring.
Yeah, it's like I'm a very experimental musician to the point where like sometimes when I go to New York to do shows, people would be like, it's kind of like why I wear the mask, because if you're doing the show and you're a guy and your voice is a female, like having the mask is kind of like a protection in a way, because American kind of guys are kind of can be a little not understanding of it. And so I created this thing where you couldn't really tell the sex of the character. And so if
Right.
I'm wearing, when I wear my full mask and gear, you can't really tell if I'm a female or a male. It's kind of non
Hmm.
you can't tell. And so if you hear the female voice coming out of that stagecraft, you're like, what is that? Who is that? You don't understand it, but you're able to kind of protect yourself and then have an idea
Hmm.
or present this character.
Hmm.
And it actually worked. I mean,
Hmm.
I would get a good response, and people were just like, didn't understand, exactly what I was doing, but they were kind of drawn to it because it was so different. So
Wow.
that's I just have this big rig, and I run foot pedals and sequencers and modular gear, running LFOs, and I just can run everything myself. After all these years of being, a musician, I figured out how to do like a one-person show, but using like hardware primarily,
Wow.
and that's kind of my stick is like I come out there and I'm not using main stage, I'm not using Ableton Live, I'm using like real synths.
Yeah. 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 Mm. I mean, I feel like I get so much to say now, and I like still want to start asking you questions.
I just
But
an example of what you can do because you haven't got out there yet. But I mean, you don't just
yeah.
have to use main stage and Ableton Live with some of the gear that's out there today. Like even the Teenage Engineering OPZ or an OP1
Mm.
are very powerful. You could do
Yeah.
a lot with those. So I've always been a big proponent of like looking at like in like like an Akai Force or an MPC or any kind of different alternative type of machine that can get you
Yeah.
what you want without having to be on the Apple. Not that that's bad, but
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was gonna. That was my response to that question. Would be that I often, when I go to a show and I see someone working with Ableton, and you can see kind of like the computer in the background of glowing, or like the setting up, and you see like the Ableton or even the Logic like program running. I feel it's very uninspiring to watch. Like, so I wouldn't want to do that. Would want to set it up in like a different way. And I think like hardware and machinery is like a way to also make it like, like
well, it's
dynamic.
kind of like the difference between like seeing Genesis and Yes during the heyday of progressive rock. You see like Rick
Yeah.
Wakeman, and you see these guys that Keith Emerson, they would have all this hardware, and you'd have all these keyboards
Mm,
and all these Eurorack type of modular synths all around them, and
mm,
that
yeah. Yeah.
was the show. And electronic
Yeah.
music kind of goes back to that being the show. Pink
Yeah.
Floyd, or you see a band
Yeah.
like Radiohead is a really good example of people doing that today. Like Wilco and Radiohead will
Mm,
come on stage with these big Euro racks, and their keyboardists and stuff will be, playing the Euro racks, actually switching
yeah.
the wires and running the dials, and that to me
Mm,
is the performance. I think it
yeah.
actually, not to take away from a DJ, but it's a different type of thing. But if you're a musician, I'd rather see like a Bernie Worrell or a Rick Wakeman playing that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it actually is like live.
Exactly. And it's a difference, I guess, also between like being an artist and being a DJ. Because like I guess they do serve two different purposes, and there's nothing
Yeah.
like, I
The
agree,
classic hip hop
nothing wrong.
DJs actually show some like really musical skills if you're on vinyl. The guys that used to
Yeah.
run the vinyl, that actually is a skill. I think there's some clubs
Yeah.
in New
Yeah. Yeah.
York City that are telling DJs you have to come in with vinyl because they
Oh,
want to
really?
see people actually do the artistry of being a DJ. Um, and if you're on a
Mm,
CDJ, you can't do it at the depth of what you used to do back in the day. Back in the day on vinyl, you show your real skill set. If you're on the
mm,
CDJ, you can show some skills, but not at the level of a guy on vinyl. You can't.
mm.
So
I
yeah,
guess that's.
people want to see the
Mm,
artistry. They want to see somebody doing it. So it's a DJ, but it's a DJ who knows that has that skill set.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really cool. And yeah. I, hmm. Now I'm starting to think about how I would design that.
Well, if I can get you
So
to
I'm
go on stage
in my
without
head.
main stage or Ableton Live, then I've actually done my mission for day.
No, I think I was already already on that track, but you definitely gave me some inspiration. Yeah,
Well, I
pushed me in
understand
there.
that there's artistry. A lot of these guys do have the Euro accent at home, and they're doing all that stuff in their studio. But I would just argue for every guy that does that in the studio, you'll bring some of that on stage. For every woman that's out there being a DJ, if you take what you
Yeah,
did on your MIDI controller or
yeah,
your soft syncs and you actually play some of those tracks live, I would just say,
yeah,
one of the things I do as to what I do is I have sequencers and stuff, but I'll mute tracks and then play stuff live on my mode. Like I'll play my mode bass line live, or I'll play my mode lead. I'll mute it on my track, and I'll have all that sequence stuff. But then when I go to play live, I'm a one man band. I'm dependent on my drum machines and stuff for some stuff. But when I go to play
yeah,
live, I'll play the piano live. Or I'll play the
yeah.
lead live. I'll play the bass live. I'll play the pad live. I'll choose in different songs what parts I'm going to play. Yeah,
But it's so different as an audience as well. Like if you're seeing someone that is immersed with what they're doing, it's pulling you in too. Like, and it's creating in the room. So I find like when a band does that, that it becomes like an entirely different, like immersive experience for you watching
well, it's
it, you
different than
know?
a dance party. I can understand if you're at a dance party, you want the stability of the song sounding what you heard on the radio, right? So if you go to a dance club and you want to hear a DJ playing, there's a place for that. And if you go to modern hip hop and kids they're not musicians per se, they're
Yeah,
more hip hop artists, and the artistry is the rap. The artistry is the rap vocal, and that's fine. I understand that.
yeah,
But when you get DJs that just hit the button, and they're running their total thing on Ableton or main stage, and they're not really changing it, that kind
yeah,
of to
yeah,
me takes away from musicianship. And I would just
yeah,
argue for those guys, like, play some of that live, like unmute some stuff and actually do something different. Um, because I
mm,
think that can kind of kill music if people do that.
mm,
Then you get like a disco type of thing going on where disco died because it kept on replicating the same thing over and over, and then people got tired of it.
yeah,
EDM could die like that because if it just keeps on doing a drop and you don't change it, and the same producers using the same samples, using the same drum loops, using the same everything, uh,
yeah. But like
yeah,
dubstep
it
as
kind of
well, like
burns out. The genres get better because of cross modulation. They mix jazz with country, you mix jazz with classical, you
mm,
mix different styles of like blues. Blues
yeah,
can become boring, but if you bring New Orleans blues with Texas blues
mm,
and then you mix it up with some hardcore Mississippi stuff, you get something Delta. You get different genres within the blues. Even though it's
mm.
all the same, blues can kind of get stuck, but it can become something else if you take little accents from different places. And that,
Yeah, yeah. Make it personal, right? Like make it present
yeah,
as well, like
yeah, bring
something that you're
yeah,
actually.
bring something of yourself. I think all the great musicians reveal something of themselves, and that's what you draw
Exactly.
in. You've got to put something personal into your music.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's yeah. But when you have that character like Josephine, do you find that's like a different, uh, like do you have like a relationship to that person
Yeah,
within like yourself that goes through other things as
yeah. I kind
well?
of Josephine. I built her up over time, and I've created this whole mythology on how she came to be. This idea that she was in this car accident, how she became a ghost.
Mm,
She was like driving with her lover, and she has a lover that was a female lover, and they were arguing, and they were in a fast car, and they crashed the car, and they became ghosts. And then she just kind of wandered in limbo for a while, and then found other ghosts that were like musicians, and they became a band. It's kind of like the idea of the gorilla.
yeah. Yeah.
You kind of get reborn. You have different phases, and then the fact that she's electric, and
Mm,
I use synths. I use like CV. I use controlled voltage analog synths. So that kind of idea that she's like a ghost in the machine, and she kind of
yeah.
sometimes even her character like has sex with the machines in a kind of metaphysical way, that she kind of channels her energy and sexuality through the machines, and machines talk to her and she talks to them. And that's the whole idea. Is that then it gets very personal, and it gets very, it goes into all kinds of areas of the psyche. You can go to dark places, to the happy places. You can do a lot with that kind of idea. And it came from like stuff I was working on, literary stuff, and so that's what the whole idea of the band is. Like, I read a lot of Ray Bradbury, I read science fiction, I read like Wordsworth and Blake. So I have a lot of Blakean ideas running through this stuff, some Wordsworth ideas and Longfellow, but then also like Bradbury, and it's just it's like a hodgepodge of a lot of things I liked, and I decided to try to bring Josephine as this kind of female part of myself that I was in touch with, and I said, well, I'm going to bring her out and create like play her, and then when I get into the character, I kind of like I can hard to explain. I kind of play her like an actor.
No, but she comes into like of course I don't know, but like in my community at home in Gotland, we have like ceremonies. We do it like there is a community there that does it like the pagan way, and we have like different ceremonies for each like season, kind of like with the year wheel, and there's 8 different times. Yeah, it's very cool. Like, you walk with the seasons basically, and it's like getting in touch with like nature and the different like kind of spirit and energy that is in
Cherokee, so I kind of understand what you're saying. I'm part Native American, indigenous.
Yeah, it's very similar. All nature, like nature-based faith is.
The spirits were all based on like the wind, the water, the animal spirits. You had animal spirits. You have like earth spirits, like water, fire, air, wind, everything. And so the idea that you respect your environment because they're like gods, or they're part of spirits, and so you don't want to kill the wolf because the wolf is a spirit. You don't want to kill the eagle or shoot the bird because like that is a spirit. So there's a respect, and if you do need to do it, then you kind of apologize because you needed to do it because you needed to eat, but you don't just do it for fun. You have a kind of respect for nature that I think some other religions don't have, because they kind of separate it.
No, it's true.
And so it's all your pagan, whatever. It's like, well, indigenous cultures tend to have a more respect for the planet.
Yeah, and understanding that you're co-creating and co-living. You're not like a human and you're living in this world which is yours. It's actually you are just a part of a bigger world, and like the trees around you and the animals around you, they equally have their own life and their own systems and collectives and everything. So like, you are not the only thing that's
not the center of the universe. There's other things, they can be just as powerful, and they may be more powerful than you. And you just have to be more humble about it. I think a lot of indigenous cultures, they have just a better way to coexist, like with the world. Yeah.
I think so. I think it's so beautiful, like, and especially when you, like, for me, like walking with the seasons and celebrating them and becoming part of it, it makes me a lot more in balance with what I'm part of, because actually the way that the seasons move is the same way that we move. It's only that you can be more or less aware of it.
Yeah,
I find
the phases of aging follow the seasons. The phases of your maturity follow.
Phases of the moon, the months.
You can kind of find a parallel.
Yeah, very much. And I think electronic is part of that really as well. It's just but anyways, like in those kinds of ceremonies, sometimes if you want to channel something, you make a mask for it, and you make an embodiment. And I find what happens is that like you let go of yourself and you take that like spirit, that power into you, and it actually, what happens is that it does come. So maybe it's like I can relate to that, like what you're saying about like Josephine in my own way through that.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I put on a mask, but you're putting on a more like indigenous ceremonial mask, and not like unlike what the Cherokee or the Blackfoots do. The same thing. They have all these ceremonial masks and cultures and like things that they do. that we're
Yeah.
all part of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do understand that's how I kind of channel. I did kind of talk to some people where I thought I was kind of bringing some Blackfoot Cherokee new age version of what my great grand um,
Yeah.
used to
The word.
do, and I'm doing it with like electronic stuff, but it's not that different than what they were doing.
No. Yeah. Mm. Mm.
That's cool. So
Mm.
yeah, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this out on the 11 platforms we're on. We're on 11 platforms on podcast all over the world. We're on Spotify, and we're a part of Spotify. And we're also on Apple.
Yeah.
We're on like Radio Public, Stitcher, Overcast. All of these will go out as we publish. We will put hyperlinks that are clickable on the podcast itself. So your YouTube channel and your video that's tied to your Instagram and your Instagram profile will be all clickable links that get published. And as you have other projects in the future, we have brought folks on the podcast in the last 2 years. We've interviewed certain artists that had different projects 3-4 times. So as you get a different project, or you're on if you release your EP or your album, we can bring you back on. And we've done like album like announcements and review shows with different bands. So we're able to do that. So yeah, we'd love to have you back on. And everybody should check out all the links we're going to put on this podcast. And we thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. It was such a pleasure speaking to you, actually. It was really fun.
Very much. I enjoy looking forward to all the projects you're working on, and especially when you put your album out. I'm going to be I'll be telling all my podcast audience about it, because I really think you're on to something here. I like what you're doing, and you've got a really authentic voice as a singer-songwriter artist, and I appreciate what you're doing. So keep on doing it.
Oh, thank you. You too, Will. And yeah, thanks again. Goodbye.